The sun was setting over the Kepler 442b colony when David decided it was time to clean out the food storage unit. He'd been living in the small habitat pod for 8 months now, and the routine had become second nature. Every evening, he'd gather the day's leftover scraps, bits of reconstituted protein, vegetable matter that hadn't been used, the occasional piece of fruit that had started to go bad. Nothing was ever wasted on the frontier. Everything had value, even garbage. David grabbed the sealed container and pushed open the heavy door of his pod. The alien air hit his face, cool and slightly metallic tasting. The sky above was already shifting into shades of purple and deep blue. Stars were beginning to appear, and he could see the distant lights of the other settlement buildings scattered across the colony. He walked behind his quarters, following the worn path he'd created over these past months. The disposal pit was about 50 yards out, far enough from the main structures to avoid attracting any of the local wildlife. Not that there was much to worry about here. The planet had been surveyed extensively before the colony was established. No large predators. No aggressive life forms. Just endless fields of crystalline vegetation and the occasional small creature that kept to itself. David reached the pit and prepared to dump the container. It was a mindless task, something he could do without thinking. That's why what happened next hit him so completely off guard. A voice echoed in his mind. Not through his ears. Not through any communication device. But directly into his thoughts, like a whisper that existed only inside his head. "We can eat your leftovers?" David froze. The container slipped from his hands and clattered to the ground, spilling scraps everywhere. He spun around so fast he nearly lost his balance, searching frantically for the source of the voice. That's when he saw them. 3 creatures stood about 20 feet away, watching him with what could only be described as hopeful curiosity. They were small, maybe the size of house cats, with bodies that seemed to shimmer and shift in the fading light. Their skin was covered in scales that caught the last rays of sunlight and threw them back in waves of color, blues, greens, purples, golds, all flowing across their bodies like liquid. They had delicate wings folded against their backs, the membranes so thin you could see light passing through them. And their eyes were enormous, intelligent, and a brilliant shade of gold that practically glowed in the dimming evening. David's mind raced. His training kicked in. He'd studied xenobiology before coming to the colony, enough to know what he was looking at. This wasn't random animal behavior. These creatures were communicating. They were thinking. They were intelligent. One of the creatures took a small step forward. The movement was careful and deliberate, almost apologetic. "We mean no harm," another voice entered his mind, this one slightly different in tone. It was like hearing someone with a different accent, even though no actual sounds were being made. "We have been hungry. Your scent, it is kind." David's hand was shaking. He could feel his pulse racing in his neck. Every training module had covered first contact protocols, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of it. These beings were talking to him. They were asking permission. They were explaining themselves. He looked down at the spilled food waste scattered across the ground. Then he looked back at the 3 creatures. Their eyes tracked his movements with clear intelligence. He could see them watching his face, reading his expressions, trying to understand what he would do. David took a slow breath. His training had emphasized one critical thing above all else. When encountering sapient life, the first interaction would set the tone for everything that followed. Every decision mattered. Every reaction would be remembered. He made a choice. "Yes," he said aloud, then realized they were communicating mentally, so he thought the words instead. "Yes, please. Take what you need." The effect was immediate. All 3 creatures made a sound that wasn't quite chirping and wasn't quite singing, something in between that somehow conveyed pure joy. They bounded forward with surprising grace and descended upon the spilled scraps. David watched in fascination as they ate. Their movements were precise and delicate. They didn't tear or rip at the food like animals would. They picked it up carefully, examined it, and consumed it with what looked like genuine appreciation. One of them, the smallest of the 3, paused and looked up at David while eating. For a moment they simply regarded each other. Human and creature. Alien and visitor. 2 completely different forms of life, meeting for the first time under the purple sky of an alien world. Then the creature went back to eating, and David realized his hands were no longer shaking. Something had shifted in that moment. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was curious. He was excited. He was witnessing something that might change everything. As he watched the 3 small beings finish their meal, David understood that his life on Kepler 442b would never be the same. The first night after meeting the 3 creatures, Kevin couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the encounter in his mind, going over every detail. Were they really intelligent? Or had he imagined the whole thing? Was his mind playing tricks on him after 8 months of isolation? But the next evening they came back. This time Kevin was ready. He'd spent the entire day thinking about what they might like. He'd set aside the better portions from his own meals, fresh fruit from the hydroponic garden, protein that hadn't been reconstituted, even some of the honey that the colony saved for special occasions. He arranged everything carefully in a metal dish and placed it about 30 feet from his habitat pod, then waited. As the sun began to set, the 3 creatures appeared. They seemed to recognize him immediately, and Kevin swore he could feel something like excitement from them. They approached the dish with more confidence this time, moving directly toward it without hesitation. That's when Kevin did something that surprised even himself. He sat down on the ground about 10 feet away from them and waited. The creatures paused. He could feel them studying him, trying to understand what he was doing. One of them, the smallest one, took a few steps closer to Kevin instead of going directly to the food. "You sit with us?" The voice in Kevin's mind carried curiosity mixed with something else. Something that felt like hope. "Yes," Kevin thought back. "I'd like to sit with you." Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Every evening, Kevin would prepare food and sit outside waiting for his visitors. Each night they seemed more comfortable with him. They began staying longer, eating more slowly, and most importantly talking to him. It was on the 8th evening that the smallest creature finally introduced himself properly. "I am Thren." The voice came clearly into Kevin's mind. The creature had settled down beside the food dish, eating slowly while Kevin sat nearby. "My siblings are Kes and Mila. We are, how do you say, young ones of our mother's line." Kevin leaned forward slightly. "Young ones? You mean like children?" "Yes," Mila, apparently the slightly larger one with the blue-green scales, confirmed. "But we are not so young anymore. We have lived many seasons. We were separated during the great storms that came before you arrived at this place." Kevin felt a wave of sympathy. These weren't just intelligent creatures, they were lost. They were separated from their family. That changed everything. Over the following nights, Kevin became consumed with learning about them. Every evening when they arrived, he would ask questions. Where did they come from? How many of their kind existed? What was their society like? The answers fascinated him. The creatures, the Caliph as they called themselves, had existed on this planet for thousands of years. Thousands. While humans had only just arrived, these beings had been building civilizations, creating art, developing philosophy. They lived in hidden valleys in the mountain ranges, away from the coastal regions where the human colony had been established. "We have governments," Thren explained one evening, his voice carrying something like pride. "Different families, different territories. We make decisions together. We create art from the crystals that grow in our caves. We have stories of our ancestors going back so far that the numbers are difficult to count." Kevin listened, absolutely captivated. This wasn't just first contact with intelligent life. This was discovering an entire hidden civilization that had been thriving in secret. But what really caught his attention was how fascinated the Caliph were about humanity. Kes kept asking about human cities, about how humans traveled, about human technology. When Kevin tried to explain airplanes and spacecraft, the three creatures grew almost silent with wonder. "You came from the stars," Mila said one evening, her voice carrying a mix of amazement and something that sounded like awe. "Your kind must be very strong. Very powerful." Kevin laughed gently at that. It was one of those moments where he felt deeply human, deeply aware of his limitations. "We're not really strong," he said honestly. "We're just resourceful, I guess. We solve problems because we have to. We build things because we need them. That's all." "That is strength," Thren said simply. "To make what you need. To solve what troubles you. That is the greatest strength." Kevin felt something shift in him during that conversation. These weren't just creatures he was feeding out of kindness. These were people. Real people with culture, history, and intelligence that rivaled his own. One evening about 2 weeks after the initial contact, Kevin made a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. "Thren," he said through their mental connection, "would you like me to meet your family?" The response was immediate. All three creatures burst into excited chirping sounds, their mental voices overlapping with what Kevin could only describe as pure joy. "Yes," they cried out. "Yes, you will meet our mother. She will want to know about you. She will want to know that the star people are kind." Kevin smiled in the fading evening light, still not fully understanding what he was agreeing to. But he knew one thing for certain. His life on Kepler 442b was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The morning came earlier than Ryan had expected. He'd barely slept the night before, his mind racing with anticipation and nervousness. At dawn, Thren arrived at his habitat pod and communicated a simple message: "Come. It is time." Ryan grabbed a light jacket and a water bottle. He had no idea what to expect, but he trusted these three creatures more than he trusted most people. He followed Thren, with Kess and Mila flying in lazy circles above him, toward the mountain range that bordered the colony. The first part of the journey was manageable. They walked through the crystalline fields that surrounded the settlement, the strange vegetation crunching beneath Ryan's boots. But as they got closer to the mountains, the terrain changed. The path became steeper, rockier, more challenging. Ryan found himself breathing harder, his legs burning from the constant climbing. Hours passed. The colony disappeared behind them, swallowed by distance and terrain. The air grew thinner, colder. Ryan could see his breath now, little clouds of white vapor dissipating into the thin atmosphere. His lungs burned with each breath, but he pressed on, following the three small creatures that seemed completely unbothered by the altitude and the difficulty. Finally, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, they reached a ridge. Thren stopped and turned back to Ryan, his golden eyes glinting with something that felt like anticipation. "Almost there," Thren communicated. "Are you ready?" Ryan nodded, even though he wasn't sure what he was supposed to be ready for. He crested the ridge and stopped dead in his tracks. Before him stretched a hidden valley, unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was massive, easily 5 miles across, and completely sheltered by towering mountain peaks. The valley floor was covered in the same crystalline vegetation as the plains, but here it grew in patterns, organized and intentional. It looked almost like a garden. And scattered throughout the valley were massive structures carved directly from the mountainside, caves and caverns that had clearly been shaped and refined over centuries. It was a city, a hidden city built by the Caliph. Ryan was so stunned by the sight that he almost didn't notice the sound at first. It started as a low rumble, almost below the range of human hearing. But it built gradually, growing louder and more intense. It was like nothing Ryan had ever heard, a sound like distant thunder mixed with something else. Something organic and deep. It reminded him of whale song, but deeper, more resonant, like the planet itself was singing. His eyes went to the sky. The shadows appeared first. Massive shapes moving across the clouds, so large that they blotted out the sun. Ryan felt the light dim around him, felt the temperature drop. The ground beneath his feet began to tremble. Not violently, but with a steady, constant vibration that Ryan could feel in his bones, in his teeth, in every cell of his body. Ryan's heart began to race. His breathing quickened. Whatever was coming, it was big. Bigger than he'd ever imagined. And then it emerged from the clouds. At first, Ryan couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. His mind refused to process it. He'd expected something large, sure. But the creature that rose above the mountain peaks was beyond large. It was colossal. Immense. Absolutely impossible. The dragon was easily 200 feet from the tip of its snout to the end of its tail. Its wings, when they unfurled, seemed to span a distance that made the mountains look small. But it was the scales that took Ryan's breath away. They were deep crimson, a red so pure and brilliant that it looked like liquid fire had been poured over the creature's body. But running through those crimson scales were veins of pure gold, glowing faintly in the morning light, like rivers of precious metal flowing across the dragon's body. The creature's head was the size of Ryan's entire habitat pod. And as it descended lower, its eyes began to open. Each eye was larger than Ryan was tall. They were the color of molten amber, ancient and intelligent and impossibly aware. Ryan felt something break inside him. Not in a bad way, but in a profound way. His knees simply gave out and he dropped to the ground. He wasn't even aware he was doing it. His body had made the decision before his mind could catch up. This wasn't just a big creature. This wasn't just another animal. This was something primal. Something ancient. Something that represented power on a scale that Ryan's human mind could barely comprehend. And yet, as he knelt there, trembling on the rocky ridge, he didn't feel threatened. He felt something else. He felt small. Insignificant. But not in a crushing way. More in the way you feel when you look up at the night sky and suddenly understand just how vast the universe really is. It was humbling. It was terrifying. And it was absolutely magnificent. The dragon descended slowly, deliberately, landing on the valley floor with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. The impact sent small tremors through the ground that reached all the way to where Ryan knelt. Thren's voice came into his mind, calm and reassuring. "Do not be afraid, the small creature said. This is our mother. This is Velsar. And she has been waiting to meet you. Ryan remained on his knees, unable to move, unable to think clearly. His entire body was shaking. Every muscle felt weak, every nerve ending firing at once. He'd never experienced fear like this. Not the kind that came from danger, but the kind that came from confronting something so impossibly large and powerful that your brain couldn't quite accept its existence. The massive dragon's head lowered. Slowly. Deliberately. Each movement seemed to take forever, like watching a mountain shift. The creature's enormous eye came closer and closer until Ryan could see his own reflection in that amber depths. He could see the individual scales on the dragon's snout, each one the size of his hand, arranged in patterns that suggested incredible age and strength. And then the voice came. It wasn't like Thren's voice or Kessa's or Mila's. Those had been like whispers in his mind, gentle and precise. This voice was different. It resonated through his entire being like the tolling of massive cathedral bells. It filled every corner of his consciousness, impossible to ignore or resist. Peace, Ryan, the voice said, and somehow the dragon knew his name. You have shown my children kindness. This is rare among your kind. Ryan tried to speak. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. His throat was too tight. His lungs wouldn't cooperate. He was struggling just to breathe normally. The dragon's enormous head tilted slightly, studying him with what Ryan could only interpret as curiosity. I am Velsar, the voice continued, each word resonating with authority and ancient wisdom. Mother of the Caliph line. For centuries we have watched your kind arrive on our world. We monitored your ships as they descended from the sky. We observed your settlement grow. We feared what you would do. Humans have a reputation across the stars, you understand. Your kind is known for taking what you want, regardless of who stands in your way. Ryan's mind was reeling. Across the stars? Did that mean the Caliph knew about other worlds? Other species? How much knowledge did this creature possess? But my young ones, Velsar continued, and Ryan could almost swear he heard something like affection in her mental voice, they are clever. Very clever indeed. They approached you as a test. A deliberate test to see the true nature of your character. Ryan felt his eyes widen. A test? All those evenings, all those conversations, all that bonding, it had been a test? Yes, Velsar confirmed, apparently reading his thoughts directly from his mind. They watched you carefully. Would you harm them when you realized how small and vulnerable they were? Would you attempt to exploit them for your own purposes? Would you capture them to show your people, hoping for reward or recognition? Or would you see their intelligence and choose compassion? Would you share your own food, ask questions with genuine interest, and treat them as equals despite their smaller size? The dragon's enormous eye blinked slowly, and somehow that simple gesture communicated volumes. You chose correctly, Ryan. Your species is not what we expected. Tears started streaming down Ryan's face without warning. He wasn't even sure why he was crying. Was it relief? Was it the overwhelming realization of what had just happened? Was it the profound honor of being tested and found worthy by this ancient, magnificent creature? Your children, Ryan managed to croak out, his voice hoarse and barely audible, they were testing me the whole time? Yes, Velsar confirmed. And you have honored that test beyond what we anticipated. You treated sapient beings with dignity. You showed curiosity without condescension. You shared your resources without expecting anything in return. You asked about our culture, our history, our people. You listened. You cared. These are not common behaviors among humans. Ryan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, still kneeling on the rocky ground. His legs felt like they might never work properly again. I don't understand, he said. Why would you test me? Why does it matter? Velsar's head lifted slightly, and Ryan could see Thren, Kess, and Mila clustered together on the valley floor below, watching the interaction between their mother and their human friend. Because, the dragon said slowly, each word carrying weight and importance, your kind has arrived on our world. More will come. Many more. We have seen this pattern before on other worlds. Usually it ends one of two ways. Either the established civilization is destroyed and displaced, or they are enslaved. We have lived here for thousands of years in peace. We did not want to make hasty decisions about your people. The dragon's enormous head lowered again, bringing her massive face closer to Ryan. But you, Velsar continued, you represent something different. Something better. You represent the possibility that humans might be capable of recognizing and respecting life that is different from your own. That you might be worthy of being called allies rather than invaders. This means your kind may be worthy allies. Not enemies. Not conquerors. but true partners in building a shared future on this world. Ryan felt the weight of that statement settle over him like a heavy blanket. He wasn't just an individual human anymore. In this moment he represented all of humanity to this ancient, powerful being. And somehow, impossibly, he had passed the test. The massive dragon's head pulled back slightly, giving Ryan space to breathe. Velsar's golden eyes remained fixed on him, ancient and knowing, as if she could see directly into his soul and understand every thought, every hope, every fear he carried. "I have a proposal for you, Ryan," Velsar communicated, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. "Your people have leadership, yes? Individuals who make decisions for your entire civilization." Ryan nodded slowly, still struggling to comprehend that he was having a conversation with a 200-foot dragon. "Then I propose a meeting," Velsar continued. "A gathering between your leaders and the councils of the Caliph. We have existed separately for so long, but our worlds have now intersected. We must decide together how we will share this planet. How we will coexist. How we will build something meaningful rather than something destructive." The dragon's enormous tail moved across the valley floor with surprising grace, creating a sweeping gesture that seemed to encompass everything around them. "You, Ryan, will be the bridge between our worlds. You will be our first ambassador. The one who introduced us. The one who proved that humans are capable of recognizing us not as threats or curiosities, but as people worthy of respect." Ryan felt the enormity of that responsibility crash down on him like a wave. Ambassador. Bridge between worlds. It was too much. Too big. Too important. "I don't know if I can do this," he said quietly. "I'm just a colonist. I'm nobody important." "You are exactly who we need," Velsar responded with absolute certainty. "You are not clouded by the politics of leadership. You are not bound by the prejudices of your civilization's history. You see with fresh eyes. You act with an open heart. These are the qualities of a true ambassador." Below them, Thren took flight and soared up to where Ryan still knelt. The small dragon circled around his head playfully, his mental voice filled with excitement and joy. "You will do it," Thren said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of absolute confidence. Mila and Kesh joined their brother in the air, creating intricate patterns around Ryan as they flew. Their excitement was contagious, pushing back against Ryan's doubt. "We have much to teach your people," Velsar said, her voice taking on a tone of generosity and openness. "For thousands of years we have studied this world. We understand its seasons, its patterns, its gifts and its dangers. We have developed medicines from the crystals that grow in our caves, medicines that can heal wounds that would otherwise be fatal to your kind. We have learned agricultural techniques suited specifically to this world's soil and climate. We know the safe passages through the mountains. We know where the water sources never fail, even during the driest seasons. We know which creatures to avoid and which are harmless." The dragon paused, her enormous eye reflecting the morning sunlight. "In exchange," Velsar continued, "we ask only for respect. We ask for peaceful coexistence. We ask that you not treat us as resources to be exploited. We ask that you recognize our sovereignty over our territories. We ask that you value our lives as equal to your own. Is this fair?" "More than fair," Ryan said, his voice growing stronger. "More than fair. You're offering us knowledge that could save lives. And you're asking for nothing but respect." "Exactly," Velsar confirmed. "Respect. The foundation of all true alliances." Over the next few hours, Velsar outlined her vision for the future. She spoke of trading routes that could be established between the human colony and the Caliph settlements. She discussed defensive strategies they could employ together against the larger predators that existed in the unexplored regions beyond the settled valleys. She painted a picture of two civilizations learning from each other, growing together, building something unprecedented in the history of either species. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Ryan realized it was time to leave. Velsar lowered her enormous head one final time. "Go now," she said. "Return to your settlement. Tell your leaders that the Caliph wished to meet with them. Tell them that a new era is beginning on this world. And tell them that it began with one human who chose kindness over fear." The journey back down the mountain felt different from the journey up. Ryan wasn't terrified anymore. He was energized. Purposeful. Thren, Kess, and Mila flew around him playfully the entire way down, chirping and singing, their joy infectious. As they descended into the plains and the colony came into view, Ryan reflected on something profound. Humanity's greatest strength had never been its weapons. It had never been its technology or its ability to build impressive structures or travel through space. No. Humanity's true strength was something far simpler and far more powerful. It was the capacity to recognize life and intelligence in forms completely different from their own. It was the ability to choose compassion when fear would be easier. It was the decision to treat others with dignity, even when no one was watching. Even when it cost something. All of this had started because he'd left out scraps for 3 hungry young dragons. When Ryan reached the colony, he didn't stop at his habitat pod. He walked directly toward the administration building, where Director Patricia Chen made all the major decisions for the settlement. Every colonist he passed noticed something different about him. He moved with purpose. With confidence. With the bearing of someone who had just witnessed something that changed everything. He pushed open the door to the director's office without knocking. "Director Chen," he said, his voice steady and clear, "I need to tell you about something that's going to change our entire future on this world. And you need to listen carefully because everything we've been planning for this colony is about to become much more complicated, and much more incredible." As he began to tell her the story, Ryan understood that nothing would ever be the same. The age of human isolation on Kepler 442b had ended. The age of alliance was beginning. And it had all started with kindness. End of story.